In a statement that has stirred fresh waves of debate on both sides of the border, former U.S. President Donald Trump delivered a pointed critique of Canada's trade practices, suggesting that the United States has not had a lot of luck in negotiations with its northern neighbor. "They'll just pay tariffs," Trump remarked, implying that Canada has been more willing to accept American-imposed tariffs than yield to Washington's demands for structural trade changes. This latest comment, made during a high-profile media appearance, has reignited discussions about the future of U.S.-Canada economic relations. A partnership that has historically been one of the closest in the world, but one that has faced increasing strain in recent years. Trump's remarks underscore a growing sentiment within his camp, that Canada's trade policies continue to favor its own industries at the expense of American businesses. A long history of trade tensions. The United States and Canada have long been each other's top trading partners, sharing a border that facilitates billions of dollars in goods and services each day. Yet, their economic relationship has been anything but seamless. From lumber disputes to dairy tariffs, both countries have repeatedly clashed over trade rules, subsidies, and market access. Trump's administration was particularly vocal in challenging what it saw as unfair Canadian practices. One of the most contentious battles during his presidency was over steel and aluminium tariffs. In 2018, the Trump administration imposed a 25% tariff on Canadian steel, and a 10% tariff on aluminium, citing national security concerns. Canada responded swiftly with retaliatory tariffs on American goods, including iconic products like bourbon and Harley-Davidson motorcycles, signaling that Ottawa would not back down without a fight. Trump's recent comment, that Canada simply pays the tariffs, appears to be a direct reference to that period. By suggesting that Canada would rather absorb the economic cost than make trade concessions, Trump is framing Canada as both stubborn and unwilling to reform what he views as unfair practices. Canada's strategy, resilience over concession. Canadian policymakers have historically taken a cautious but firm approach when responding to U.S. trade pressure. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government, for instance, refused to bow to Trump's tariff threats during the 2018 standoff. Ottawa argued that the United States' national security rationale was unfounded, and instead of making quick compromises, Canada targeted politically sensitive U.S. exports with retaliatory measures, effectively matching Trump's aggressive stance. Analysts note that this approach aligns with Canada's broader economic strategy, which is focused on maintaining sovereignty over key industries, particularly energy, agriculture, and manufacturing, while diversifying trade partnerships to reduce dependency on the United States. Over the last decade, Canada has actively pursued trade agreements with the European Union, Asian economies, and the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, aiming to build a more balanced global trade network. Trump's assertion that Canada will just pay tariffs highlights an underlying frustration. Ottawa has proven more resilient than Washington often anticipates. Rather than making sweeping concessions under U.S. pressure, Canada has shown that it can endure temporary economic pain in order to safeguard long-term interests. Economic stakes for both nations. The U.S.-Canada trade relationship is one of the largest in the world, with bilateral trade exceeding $1 trillion annually. Both nations rely heavily on each other's markets. Canada is the second-largest trading partner for the United States, while the U.S. remains Canada's biggest export destination. The intertwined nature of their economies means that tariffs and trade wars hurt both sides. When the Trump administration imposed steel tariffs in 2018, American manufacturers that relied on Canadian steel saw costs soar. In response, Canada's retaliatory tariffs targeted politically sensitive sectors like agriculture and consumer goods, causing economic ripples across U.S. states that were critical to Trump's political base. Economists argue that if Trump were to pursue a renewed tariff-heavy strategy against Canada, industries such as automotive manufacturing, agriculture, and energy would face significant disruption. Cross-border supply chains, particularly in the automotive sector, are deeply integrated, with parts and components crossing the border multiple times before final assembly. Tariffs could disrupt this flow, leading to higher costs for manufacturers and consumers alike. A potential second trade war? While Trump's remarks were brief, they are being interpreted as a signal that Canada could once again become a key target in his trade agenda, should he return to the White House. During his presidency, Trump positioned himself as a tariff-first negotiator, leveraging economic pressure to force trade partners into making concessions. His approach with Canada was no exception, as evidenced by the tense negotiations that ultimately led to the USMCA, United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, which replaced NAFTA. If Trump follows through on his rhetoric, experts warn that another trade confrontation is likely. However, Canada today is arguably better prepared to withstand such pressure than it was in 2016. The country has strengthened its trade ties with Europe and Asia, while also investing in domestic manufacturing and energy independence. These moves are aimed at reducing the impact of potential U.S. tariffs. Canada's response: silence or strategy? As of now, Canadian officials have not issued a formal response to Trump's recent remarks. This silence is strategic, according to trade analysts, who suggest that Canada is avoiding getting drawn into a political skirmish before it's necessary. Instead, Ottawa is likely monitoring the U.S. political landscape, preparing for various scenarios depending on the outcome of the 2024 election cycle. Behind the scenes, Canadian policymakers are reportedly working on contingency plans to shield key industries, particularly the energy and automotive sectors, from potential U.S. tariff hikes. This could involve expanding trade with emerging markets, or offering financial support to domestic companies affected by tariff disputes. A diplomatic balancing act for Canada, managing its relationship with the United States has always been a delicate balancing act. On one hand, Canada cannot afford to alienate its largest trading partner. On the other hand, it cannot allow itself to be bullied into trade deals that undermine its economic sovereignty. This challenge is compounded by the shifting global economic landscape. With the rise of China, India, and other emerging economies, Canada is increasingly looking to diversify its partnerships. However, no other country offers the level of trade volume and geographic advantage that the US does. This creates a dependency that Trump has often exploited in his negotiations. Trump's political calculus. Trump's renewed criticism of Canada may also be aimed at appealing to his political base. Trade issues have long been a cornerstone of his populist economic message, resonating with American workers who feel left behind by globalization. By portraying Canada, often viewed as a friendly ally, as taking advantage of the US, Trump reinforces his image as a tough negotiator willing to confront anyone. Furthermore, Canada's strong climate and environmental policies have occasionally clashed with Trump's energy agenda. During his presidency, Trump criticized Canadian energy policies, and questioned projects like the Keystone XL pipeline, which became a flashpoint between environmental advocates and the oil industry. His current rhetoric may be partly aimed at reigniting these debates, and winning support from American energy sectors. A renewed trade confrontation between the US and Canada would have ripple effects across the global economy. Both countries are key players in the G7, and share strong ties with Europe and Asia. A breakdown in their economic relationship could disrupt international supply chains, particularly in industries like automotive manufacturing, technology, and agriculture. Additionally, Canada's role as a major exporter of critical minerals, including those essential for electric vehicle production, could become a bargaining chip in future negotiations. Trump's comments suggest that he may be willing to use tariffs as leverage to gain favorable terms in these emerging industries. The road ahead. As the political climate in the United States intensifies ahead of the 2024 elections, Canada is likely to remain a recurring theme in Trump's trade rhetoric. Whether this translates into concrete policy actions will depend on various factors, including the outcome of the election and the state of global trade. For now, Trump's assertion that the US hasn't had a lot of luck with Canada serves as both a warning and a reminder. It highlights the fragile nature of even the closest trade relationships when national interests collide. While Canada may just pay tariffs, as Trump claims, the long-term consequences of such policies could be damaging for both nations. Conclusion. Donald Trump's latest remarks about Canada are more than just a passing comment. They are a reflection of a broader economic philosophy, one that prioritizes aggressive trade tactics over traditional diplomacy. His claim that Canada would rather pay tariffs than negotiate underscores the complex dynamics of the U.S.-Canada relationship, a relationship built on mutual dependence, but also marked by recurring disputes. If Trump returns to power, the likelihood of renewed trade tensions with Canada is high. Yet, Canada's resilience, its strategic diversification, and its willingness to retaliate suggest that it will not be an easy target. Both nations will need to navigate this delicate relationship carefully, as the costs of another trade war would be steep for industries, businesses, and consumers on both sides of the border.